Lesson 1.4, How to Mix and Prepare Lye Properly. One of the most intimidating parts of soap making for a new soap maker is that just when you've read enough to feel comfortable to start your first batch, you've also read enough to be pretty intimidated working with a caustic chemical that could potentially be disastrous if mishandled. Well, in this lesson, I'm going to solely focus on making and handling lye water in preparation for your soap recipe, and when we're done, we can erase anything that might have felt daunting. We're going to review the safety practices again, and I'm going to go into more detail about what to expect and how to avoid mishaps while you're working, so that by the time you're ready to try this at home, you'll feel confident in what you're doing. As a review from the last video, put on your gloves and your safety glasses, put on a mask, wear long sleeves and pants to protect yourself from any splashes. When the lye water is mixed into the oils, it's still active, and you can really feel the bite for as long as about 3 days. So when you do put a stick blender to the soap batter, sometimes it will splatter, so keep your skin covered. You're going to find it helpful to have all your containers and utensils collected in front of you before you begin. Now this helps you keep your eyes in front of you on your project, and you won't have to turn your back on what you're working on. So this includes bowls, mixing spoons, a thermometer, and a scale. You'll want to have the distilled water and the lye readily available. Before you begin, remove anything from your workspace that doesn't have to do with this project so there's nothing in the way and you don't risk cross-contaminating your other things. You need to sanitize your workspace, and a spritz of rubbing alcohol should do. You need to make it a solid rule that your eating and drinking space never overlaps your soap making space. Now this means all countertop foods need to be put away, and there should be no open packages left in the kitchen, and this needs to be done before you even pull out the lye. Do not mix your tea and coffee breaks in the same space that you make your lye water. If you spill, and these tiny crystals end up inside your bread package, this is really a problem. So this needs to be one of the rules that you do not slack on. Also, make sure you have ventilation available if you need it. Having an open window nearby can be helpful. First, place a container on the scale and tear out the weight of the container. Pour the distilled water according to the measurement in your recipe. Now you'll get the best result if the distilled water is already cold. This will keep the temperature down when the lye is being dissolved, and the chemical reaction is more calm when the water is chilled. And if you want, you can even use ice water. Next, place the lye container on the scale and tear the container. Pour the lye crystals according to your recipe. Now in soap making, you want to get your measurements as accurate as possible. This does matter, and you'll see more about that in the next video. Measuring in ounces is perfectly fine, and this is especially fine if your recipe is over a pound. But if you are making a little bit less soap and you're measuring in increments less of a pound, you might end up finding this easier to pour out your measurements in grams. Now let's prepare the solution. Now I like to make my lye water at the bottom of the kitchen sink. When I keep it lower than the countertop, there's less of a chance of it getting knocked into while I go and work with my oils. But all you really need to do is just find a place where elbows and hands are not going to get in the way and this won't get bumped into. Now with my bowl in the sink, I'm pouring the lye crystals into the water, and I'll start to dissolve the lye into the water. It's pertinent that you never pour the water into the lye. The chemical reaction is just too strong, and your mixture would expand instantly. It could create a volcano effect, increasing your chances of overflowing and burning you. So we always pour crystals into the water. We always dissolve the crystals into the water, never the other way around. Even when we maintain as much control over this as possible, you'll always see a substantial reaction. You'll want to sprinkle the lye crystals in slowly, maybe in increments, and get them dissolved as you go along. If you dump the entire amount into your water, you'll get a more violent reaction. So if you want to help keep this under control and keep the reaction to a minimum, we want to do this in stages or just generally slowly. Now the water will still immediately give off fumes, smoke, and begin to boil. You'll want to keep your face away from the fumes and just keep stirring the solution until everything settles down. From the moment the crystals hit the water, The most violent part of the reaction takes about 30 seconds, and this is where you'll want to wear a mask. The fumes will reach out to about 4 feet before it dissipates enough to where you won't notice it, and it's really not easy to stir those crystals and keep your head 4 feet away, so if you take a breath, it will choke you. Now, you can avoid this with a basic painter's mask, and as I mentioned in the previous video, gasping for a breath or two may not seem to do any long-term damage, but really you don't want to subject yourself to this every day multiple times. It's not good, so cover your face. After stirring for about 30 seconds, the solution will begin to settle and the fumes will quickly dissipate, but the water will look cloudy and the temperatures are near or at boiling. This can get as hot as 200 degrees, and this all happens in just a few seconds right at the moment of contact. You won't mix the lye water with the rest of the recipe until the solution has cooled down to somewhere between 100 and 125 degrees. Now make sure all the lye crystals are dissolved completely. If you stop stirring too soon, the lye has a tendency to settle and harden at the bottom of the bowl. If this happens, the amount of lye will not be correct in your recipe and you won't get complete saponification. You'll end up with a gooey mess after 24 hours when the soap should otherwise be starting to set up. So make sure you feel the bottom of the bowl when you stir so that you know that the crystals didn't sink to the bottom and get rock hard. Now, all we need to do is set this aside and let it cool, and we'll go prepare the other ingredients.